Jenny.
Yes.
You're dead. It's dead on time for you. We're running a bit behind, but not for you. You're dead on time, mate. Welcome, Jenny.
Having Jenny back. Jenny, thank you for that.
Jenny, you know the rules. Each submitter has 10 minutes, and you can use it how the 10 minutes how you wish.
Is this live streamed?
And we won't start clicking until you are ready to go.
But it is live streamed.
You're now in public.
I'm not an actress. Okay. Okay. I'm ready.
Okay. She asked if you're ready. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've clicked.
Oh. Atamari, rau rangatirama.
Atamari.
Okay. Koutou katoa. Koutou mai. I tēnei rā whakahirahira. It's always an important day when it's regional council. Right, so I will sit as opposed to last time. Thank you for the opportunity. Of all the submissions I've ever put together, this was really ad lib. I didn't really put much weight in my written submission. I just knew that this was a process and it's an opportunity to take part. So I'm saying thank you for that, as our democracy permits. So why, more than anything, I should give some background on myself. So I don't know, I've known some of you quite some time now. Where I come from as a philosophy is that I'm training-wise, once I left high school, I went and did 10 years of human health and wellbeing as a nurse, both nationally and internationally, ski fields, yachts, stuff like that. And then what actually moved me into environmental science and marine zoo, etc., aquatics, was one of the first impressions I had of an elderly Māori gentleman on the wards at Wellington Hospital as a trainee nurse. And there was this one solitary being staring at the ceiling, and I was going, it's so unusual, where's the rest of his whānau, you know? And because we hypothetically trained about health equilibrium, and that meant that once we got into a ward situation, you could see that it wasn't happening in practice, right? So at least we now have provision for whānau to be involved with an individual's healthcare. If someone presents with a health condition, you guarantee the rest of the whānau have that condition, pretty much, because, and then over a duration, like nursing and I, just it came to a halt because it's handy, it'll get you around the world. Yeah, you're still dealing with the issue once it presents itself rather than the preventative approach. And I thought, we have a tiny wee country and we're putting so much into waiting till someone falls over in terms of our tiny budget. And why not allocate the health spend in a preventative fashion and thereby save this country money? And we could put the money into other things, the health spend. And so come 1990 celebrations, when New Zealand, I'd been living overseas, came home, there was the tour of the tall ships around Aotearoa, just like we've had for the sesquicentennial. Māori, we were building waka, you might recall, Tamatiara ki nui. It was, to me, amazing experience to be at home, having just come from overseas and seeing an expression of Aotearoa. I'm just going to ask you, a show of hands, who recalls that time? Well, that's the minority, which is unfortunate.
The old ones.
Yeah.
So
it was like a fever and a ripple of expression of people coming together, literally, to build a waka and paddle it at Waitangi for the what were the 150th celebrations? Sesqui. Thank you. And those canoes were meant to have been built for the 100th celebration of Aotearoa, but that would have been 1940. Well, we know what happened in 1940. So it got rolled back another half a century. And so anyway, as part of that experience, I was given a vision. And I know people have dreams here, they're conscious of them, or, So I was actually guided to take on my life in the aquatic space. So why am I labouring these points? I ended up with a bachelor's, master's, environmental science and aquaculture. I was meant to put food back on our reef at Te Wanga. And I have a couple of roles, which is mountain to the sea, like ngā kaitiaki o te awa Ngaruroro. I'm going to meet most of you again next week during the tank process, which is the Ngaruroro catchment. And then I'm the convener of that group. And then also the Kahungui ki te Mata o Maui, which is a customary fisheries collective of all the marae hapu of Hastings, area Heretaunga, and the wider Ahuriri. And this is a fairly difficult assemblage of people that came about through customary fisheries legislation. It's the largest rope of its kind at Aotearoa. I have submitted an annual planning process on behalf of that group, and nothing occurred. We didn't hear back from the council. So I'm just appealing you to please integrate people at place to reverse the trends since the inception of the existing legal instruments, that as Te Ao Māori we find these processes paralysing. And could you please be authentic? That doesn't mean that authenticity will, and by being authentic I mean engage with people at place who have the lived experience, because we're in the water conservation order hearings and the only people with a lived experience are the tangata whenua, the mana whenua of that river. Everyone else is talking about us in a second or third, a consultant, the applicants, the legal counsel. Everyone is on a payroll of some sort. We are there with aroha. We are the people that know that awa. We are the first people to ever live here. And some of us go back to pre-waka. So I'm hoping in the next 10 years, however HBRC is at the moment, that you can find various ways to integrate people at place to reverse the trends that Te Ao Māori and the environment and the well-being of everyone here in Hawke's Bay, so we can thrive, so can we really, really thrive and support each other in our best lived experience for our mokopuna. Humans are bioindicators, right? You see the water quality lapse. You see the food not present anymore, as you would have heard the various taonga species. What you knew as children playing around in our waterways, so different. So can you just find some policies that can make Hawke's Bay the best place that ever. Everyone wants to live here because we've got it sussed, It's not too much to ask over 10 years, is it? And that's probably like 9 minutes.
Yes, nearly.
Okay, over to you now.
Yeah, questions for Jenny? Craig,
Thanks.
we have time for one question.
Thanks, Jenny. So therefore, the quality of our water and the way we treasure our water, wherever it may be, reflects that. That's the key building block to be that.
I've just, over time, used a little thing like this. We are the water. So how the water is reflected in us. So, and because the interstitium, 85% of us is water, right? We are water. We are the water.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jenny. We have, you got a question, Rick, have you?
I was just going to say to Jenny, I think that your
you want to speak, not a question.
Well, just to make a reflection back to Jenny, make sure she feels that we've got her message, just that the council, to do its job best, needs to make sure it works with everybody. It talks to people and listens, particularly to tangata whenua.
Well, everyone has sensitivities.
Yeah.
And I think it's okay to start at that point,
Yeah,
and rather than get lost in policy and then wonder what happened,
yeah.
and save a lot of money.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Get a
Jenny.
better answer.
We really appreciate how you continue to be involved in all these community issues and stand up and be counted. Thank you
Te
very much.
Wairua
Thank you.
spirit.
Now,
Thank
Tania's still, I can't see her here, so she's not here. So we will ask the Mayor, the Honourable Mayor of Wairoa, come up. Now, Craig, before you start, I noticed that an item this afternoon, Wairoa District Council's got your name against it as well.
Yes.
Is that two?
Yeah.
You're going to come back this afternoon, or do you want to do it both now?
Oh, I'll probably do them both now, but it really would help. It would help me, that's for sure.
Well, we do everything we can to help
I,
you, of course.
I noticed that.
We
Yeah.
do.
All the time.
Now, so you know, there also that actually gives you a little bit more time because you've got two things recorded. So
No, that'd be good.
you know the rules. We'll keep you within the time slot and leave time for questions from councillors.
Yep, I'll just find the other one, so I'm all set to go.
Got two, yeah.
Craig,
Oh, it's Michelle.
Oh, and Michelle.
Michelle's over there.
Yeah, welcome.
I'm on the
Michelle,
screen.
Hey, Craig.
Okay, Craig.
Rightio. E kanui, e karahi, e rau rangatira mā. Tēnā koutou katoa. Hey, look, thanks for this opportunity for letting me submit my personal submission as well as one for the Wairoa District Council. I had myself all sort of sussed out to submit from the other end, which I always have, but you've turned the tables on me, so I hope it doesn't affect my submission. Look, I'd like to firstly acknowledge all the great things that Hawke's Bay Regional Council does do, and it's particularly the staff up in the Wairoa community. You have a great team up there led by Nathan and carried on from the work from Peter Manson, so we do appreciate that. Yeah, the interest in the rate increases in Wairoa region, I've done quite a bit of research. We're looking about 11 to 14%, so obviously somewhere else is paying a lot more. Look, I'll take it as my personal submission is read, but just sort of to highlight, you know, we're a little bit concerned with 6 key projects that Wairoa probably hasn't been earmarked at all in those projects, and we just hope the $4.8 million paid out for trees, or will be paid out, isn't all for Wairoa. I can't stress more than I hope that Wairoa is treated as a land base and not a population base, i.e. the way the money is spent up in our region, as I'll go in my Wairoa District Council presentation after this. We're 30% of the land area and over 60% of the water of the whole of Hawke's Bay. We need to stop the rhetoric that the significant areas of Wairoa land need to be planted in trees, that significant areas of Wairoa Hill Country is all slipping into the river, and Wairoa farmland is unproductive and all our stock are living and dying in the river. They certainly are not. Even up the playing field, we really want you guys to start prosecuting the foresters who have been non-compliant. Up to now, from a palming point of view and from many in the district, it appears Hawke's Bay Regional Council turned a blind eye to their unlawful activities. And you know, we talk about green and beautiful for forestry, but many layers of soil are left up, or sediment are removed when the milling occurs. Yet farmers only ever mentioned about the silt in the rivers, and no consideration for slash left on the hillsides that will end up in the waterways. Look, I'd really like the Regional Council to do some meaningful studies around the damage forestry does to the environment. You know, it comes in, sprays out huge areas of native bush to plant their trees, pushing in massive roadways, clearing for huge skid sites. It is massive. Annihilating all the ecosystems that have grown up over the 30 years when harvest, and honestly they leave behind a barren hillside ridden of all soils, sediment slash left to fall into our waterways, and that's, even if they plant within a year, that still bleeds silt when it rains. I'd love the Regional Council to do some study of what happens to the soil around the 3rd and 4th rotation, because it doesn't appear to be any studies done on that, and we're hearing that the soil, and this is part of your job, is deteriorates quite rapidly. And also, I've had a mate who cut a whole lot of trees out of his place. All the springs had dried up, they're now starting to run again. So we talk about quality of water, let's look at the bigger picture, please. Yeah, and really, I'm interested in you presented your river tests and that, and I live up towards Waikato and Waino, and I was pretty shocked to see that that river was probably one of the bad ones, when I think we need to do some better testing and just seeing where that silt comes from, or sediment in the river. I'm assuming it's not ecosystem. And Michelle, I've been looking for dead cows in the river since you mentioned it in Wairua, and I haven't found one yet. I have found a couple of dead cows, but they're nowhere near the river. So not every cow dies in the river.
Kotari.
Yeah, and just go back in time a little bit. Do some historic on what actually were on the hillsides in Wairua. It wasn't all trees. A lot of it was fern and bracken, and we're trying to replace something that wasn't there in the first place. My grandfather used to talk about when he arrived up there after the First World War, that the hillsides were clear and all the manuka and scrub ended up on the hills because the sheep carried the seeds up, and that's how a lot of those bigger trees got up in the hills. I'm not saying don't plant them, but let's do some proper work instead of assumptions. Hey, look, possum control has been a credit to the Hawke's Bay Regional Council in the past, and then we've carried on. Every farmer that I know does it every year, but I am really worried that forestry and DOC do not do it. So we trap out everything, and then I'll come up my driveway and I'll see some real big fat possums, and I just wonder where they've come from. They've probably come across the river from the forestry, because apparently they do swim rivers. So we need to make sure we get that right. And listening to a guy who had TB recently, a guy called, I can't think of his name now, and it was a pretty sad story, and we're in a very similar situation with forestry and DOC all around us. Lloyd Holloway, I think his name was.
Yeah, and Aiken.
Yeah. And can we have more focus on exotic weeds, especially old man's bed? Look, you're doing a great job, but I had an example where they've sprayed out some of the neighbours. I spoke to the neighbour, and we should have just done the whole area together. And so now it's been too late for me, and it's old man's bed's completely out of control. I have no idea where it's come from. It seems to have been following the rivers and the roads up. But yeah, it's pretty scary stuff. Can we change the right tree, right place to the right place, right tree? That sort of makes a lot more sense. Hey, look, I'm congratulating on the riparian and erosion funding. I'm about to, once I can get a fence to fence up 3 k's of river and a little bit of bush out the back. This is fantastic, and this is what I really think, you guys are doing well, but we just need to make it easier. I can't get a fence, and if I don't get a fence, I might lose my funding, so it's sort of a bit scary, really. Hey, I'll probably present a bit more at our regional park. There's been a huge disappointment. I really want you guys to talk about that again in Wairua, because that's a prime example to protect our awa, and it's just crying out to be loved. And we're doing as much as we can, but yeah, just please bring it forward from the 5th year in your long-term plan. Hey, look, and we just really, whilst we encourage planting for carbon, you've got to understand it's very short-term, especially in exotics. It's only about 30 years, for and it's going to be a concern for you guys if you have hillsides full of exotics that'll fall over and there won't be any carbon money coming in. What's going to happen to that land? Are they going to walk away as a government? And you don't know at the moment what this government is up to. Going to change legislation where they can waive the rates, and because no one will be able to pay. The metal quarry stuff, James, I've got some really good information here on the metal quarrying stuff. They have cut one particular from 22,000 cubes back to about 3,000. That's huge. That's going to, for potential costs for Wairua or for the maintenance of their roads, if we've got to get our metal from down here or from Gisborne. Yeah, and I think that's pretty well on my... Oh, and I commend the Hawke's Bay Regional Council being involved in the horticultural project, along with Tato to Wairua and ourselves, so, or the Wairua District Council. This should be a good one. And yeah, and I've encouraged, staff and elected members, I'd really love to get you up into Wairua at some stage to have a look around the farming, just to show that it's not all slipping away into the rivers. Right, that's my one there. Do you want me to carry on with my other one?
Yeah, I think we'll take questions all at once.
Yep,
so
cool.
That'll be
All good.
Because they're all quite related.
Oh, it's already up there. So do I have the clicker? Is that us? Mm-hmm. Cool. Hey, look, once again, like I was going to say, I'll acknowledge all the staff and the great work they do. So what do I click here? Oh, not that one, obviously.
Don't touch any more buttons.
Yeah, I reckon.
Now, where is it gone?
I've got some copies here too, but I only saving the ratepayer money. I thought might as well put them on you to copy, and you can
We'll
put
send you
them
the bill.
on your big rate increase.
Send you the bill.
Yeah,
It's actually more expensive for us to do it for you.
Our ratepayers are your ratepayers, Craig.
exactly.
Is it that one?
So do I just through the
Just
scroll? Do I?
this like this,
Yeah.
and then you should be able to just use
Okay.
the scroll down.
Good. Okay, so this is our pretty well Wairo's visions and mission statements from the Wairo District Council point of view. You know, self-supported, well-led community, strong, prosperous economy, protected and healthy environment, valued, cherished culture, connected communities, treasured communities or environments, thriving economy, decide lifestyles. We're a little bit concerned they don't seem to be aligning to as good as they could with the Hawke's Bay Regional Council and what you're up to. I've just put there, Wairo spend, is it more trees? We are concerned, I put a round circle in there with Wairo in it there once you do your deliberations, if you want to chuck something in there for us. This is the question we always ask, you know, is the Hawke's Bay spend on land base or the population? As you can see, Wairo is a huge chunk of the Hawke's Bay region. This is a really interesting one, the importance of Wairo water for Hawke's Bay Regional Council. You know, we talk about water storage for farming down in central Hawke's Bay and Hastings, where it's actually not needed up in Wairo, but yet we're talking about planting Wairo into trees, which we've probably got an ideal environment for farming. Yeah, once again about our Wairo River Regional Park, we really want those conversations back on the board, please, and really serious conversations, and please don't promise us things that we're not going to get. This is a picture of Wairo looking back towards AFCO over Spooner's Point, and this will be what we've spoken about, the regional park for Wairo. And that's a plan put together by the Hawke's Bay Regional Council about 8 years ago, Ria River, and that got us pretty excited, to be quite honest, that something was going to happen. But these are some points put together by the Regional Council, same time. One of the couple down the bottom there says enhancing and invigorating community spaces and urban environments also play an important part in revigorating Wairo. So the Regional Council were well aware of it back then, and you know, in each page is investigate each note and illustrate planting recommendations, design strategies, and specific long-term goals for the Wairo River. It was a wonderful set of plans put together. There's only one thing you got wrong. You moved the lighthouse down to the other end, and Rex, that might have been your influence, thinking your father had something to do with the lighthouse.
I would never move the lighthouse, Craig.
Good man. Hey, so comments like this in the paper, there are significant areas of land in the Wairo district that will in time need to go to permanent forest cover. There may not be a Wairo meatworks in 100 years. Sediment, better read
Did I hear
this.
that?
What's that?
Did I hear you say that?
No, that's what had been said in the paper.
Doesn't agree with us.
I don't agree with them. Sediment yield from erosion and effect of livestock and fertiliser on our waterways, yet there's never ever mention about what forestry are doing to the environment. And here's the articles that I got those little statements out of. There may not be, I think, James, you might have been the author of that one. And this will add value through domestic processing. Well, interesting, we have a mill in Wairo and he struggles to get logs from time to time. And he believes if the planting continues in 10 years' time, his mill will be dead because he can't get pruned logs. That's just the way things have changed. Now, this is a picture of a farm up in Wairo, but a hill country there, that's pretty frowned upon by Regional Council. Now, that's probably one of those areas that should be planted in trees because it's erosion prone, and you know, for me, we love our land. And then this is the forest. You can come in and do this. Well, how do I get that video going? I can't see because Rex is in the bloody way.
That's the bane of your life.
Yeah, you are, mate. You are in my way.
Thank God someone is.
It wasn't in the play button.
Yeah, it should be there, but here we go.
Oh, there it is.
No,
You see it
you
now?
go down there. Oh, Nelly had it. I'll let you.
There it is. The other one.
Mouse is a bit twitchy.
It is very twitchy. Keeps on
Thanks very
going.
much, no. Just about here.
Now this is drone footage just taken the other day. This is out at Waihua. Now this is beautiful farmland, and you'll see bits there have been sprayed out entirely. I'll try and point them out when I see them. Oh, thank you. You see in the distance there all those grey looking bits. Big chunks up to the left there.
What was that, Craig? Gorse or?
No, just bush. A lot of that stuff. Actually, my mate looked at buying this place, but he didn't buy it for the main reason he didn't think he'd be able to clear a lot of this stuff. And forestry seemed to be coming in and having a good old spray out. There's some more stuff up to the left up there. It's actually it's not bad hill country. It just needed a good farmer on it really. Must be a bit windy up in there, but. And that's stuff that's been recently milled by forestry, just to give an idea of the landscape, and you can see it gets pretty barren and it goes back to the boards of just silt.
Not much bush left.
No, that's all been in forestry, and then this is all the new stuff going in. Right, that's that one. I'll keep going. I don't want Rex to cut me off short. This is an image of forestry. It is green and beautiful in that picture, and it just looks like, that's just magnificent. This is what we consider green and beautiful in Wairau, because that produces, I think it's about 7 or 8 jobs per 1,000 hectares, where forestry is about 2 jobs per 1,000 hectares in Wairau. And that's an interesting one there. Look in the background, you'll see a bit of bush. That has never been touched probably ever in the since whoever came to New Zealand first, and it's erosion prone. You're not going to stop it by planting it. It's to the bones of papa faces, and yeah. And I promise you, Michelle, none of those cows will end up in the river. They should end up in the works, hopefully.
Hopefully.
And now that's a bit out the back. That's actually quite a bit steeper than it looks. And that's considered probably highly erodible land, and that's our livelihood. Now this is as big slips came through, big rain event came through probably about 5 or 6 years ago. That is my property as well, and that was devastating for us, pretty heartbreaking. That's the 5 generations of our family been on this place, and it does really affect you because you love your land, and but none of those slips made it to the river. As you can see, they stop. There's a creek, probably another couple of 100 metres, so none of that ended up in the Wairau River. I can guarantee you. Now you come out there and they're fully recovered. We've grassed them, and away they go again. But this is quite acceptable to happen in the farming, in the forestry world, and nothing happens to them. You can see a digger operating up the top. They carved a big track through the top. The river is just below. Unfortunately, when we put that on, we cut the river off. It's just below there, so that's all ready to come into the river. Oh. That's another picture, probably 3 years later. It still hasn't recovered, and that's another area that you can see the creek right down the bottom, and that's all been milled, and that'll just get a rain event, big chunks of land will slip down to that waterway, and Michelle, you'll see it coming past the awa down in town there.
Yeah. That previous one, Waio, I think, eh?
Yeah. Waikarita Hiki, the first 2. And then that's what happens, and this is just shocking stuff. And that's a picture of my farm, but that's a pretty typical Wairau farm. You can see there's trees scattered throughout the farm. They talk about farmers being the worst emissions polluter after transport. Well, I'd love to do the homework and just whether I'm actually probably carbon neutral there, or even might be zero neutral, because I've got and I'm still working with to fence some bottom bits off, and obviously that river right down the bottom of the picture will be all planted and fenced off shortly. So, and you know, farmers they're pretty sensible on their land, but they do need help. But don't come at us with a big sledgehammer. Work with us, please. And that's a really interesting map of the Wairau district. You can see the big dock reserve up there, Waikato Moana, and you'll see some brown bits, that's indigenous. You'll see, shame I can't see that, but it's really worth getting and having a look at. The pink bits or purple bits, they've gone the last 2 or 3 years to forestry, and we've probably got about another 2,000 hectares that have gone. So that just demonstrates that, you know, Wairau does have a lot of areas of already planted. And that's a bit of a pie chart just showing you dockland, forestry land, and Wairau is the small, farming is a small part of about 32% of land that we take up. But that will be significantly going quickly if we keep planting. And this is what will happen if we keep carbon farming in the Wairau district. It sounds pretty dramatic and that, but it's not. We will be gone. And, you know, from a council's point of view, we've worked pretty hard to get our population up and running and increase, you know, doing great things in the town. So it does worry us. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. You were dead on. We haven't got time for questions, unfortunately. But,
No, all good.
But I think we got your message on all accounts. And
Good.
one thing we are never left any doubt with what you think.
Yeah, no, it's and probably more what I know, Rex, because I live there, and I really urge you guys to come up and have a look around with me. Thank you.
Yeah, we're
Thanks,
coming.
Craig.
We are. We're coming.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Plan.
Okay, we have Urban Rite. So are you Forest and Bird, are you?
Forest and Bird.
Lynn.
There we go.
We have
Napier.
Urban Rite first, they're not here. So, well, Lynn, we will take you then.
Yeah, but that's government.
Thank you.
Following anyone on converting good farmland.
Last time.
It was a bugger. My machine's frozen.
Restart it again.
Oh, I can't get it turned
And
quickly
it's,
up.
Thomas Hayes coming in about the notes.
Yep, and then slide that. But if he's scaremongering.
Thank you. Well, you have, all submitters have 10 minutes, and you can use the whole 10 minutes if you wish,
Right.
or you can leave some time for council's
Thank you.
question. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. Lynn Anderson and John Warren from the Napier branch of Forest and Bird. We'll be speaking on the Honorary Regional Park and also flood protection. For the Honorary Regional Park, we support option 1 in principle, although, as we know you're aware, at this stage there's very little detail, so it's difficult to know what we're agreeing to. But we appreciate you have to start somewhere with the concept. The proposed Honorary Regional Park has huge potential and is a great opportunity to give something back to nature when so much has previously been taken away. Our main concern is that recreational opportunities will become the dominant force, and we strongly urge that the proposed regional park is first and foremost a wildlife refuge. However, recreation must be carefully balanced so that wildlife is not disturbed, but it's also very important for people to have the opportunity to view, enjoy, and appreciate the area. Educational opportunities are also very important. So, of course, if people can appreciate and enjoy the area, they will be more inclined to want to protect it and be more inclined to want to protect biodiversity in general. We also urge that significant areas such as the Southern Marsh, where many vulnerable species have been sighted over the years, and the North Channel be left alone and be forever free of people, bikes and dogs. The North Channel is one of the few areas in New Zealand where Australasian bittern breed. This bird is as rare as the kakapo, and if that area is opened up, it will be the end of the bittern. It's a sad statistic that 80% of New Zealand native and endemic bird species have a concerning threat status, That is, they are either threatened, endangered, or at risk. And it's not just the bird species, 100% of reptile species are in that category. And it just doesn't seem to be realised how absolutely critical this situation is with our natural biodiversity. So we all need to do something to turn those statistics around. We know that wetlands can be done well. Look at the West Shore scrapes, which has proved a great roosting place for a couple of hundred godwits, Hawke, which visit us each summer, and where Tarapuka, New Zealand's endemic black-billed gulls, have twice set up a nesting colony. And with Waikahu wetland, you may be interested to know that February last year I took 2 prominent English park rangers, top birders there, and they just couldn't believe how new that wetland was. The birds had just moved in. I have recently viewed bittern in that area, and as you may know, royal spoonbill were breeding there last season. So that is certainly a well done. And they told me in the United Kingdom that wetlands had been attempted to be developed, and they'd just sat there for years, virtually devoid of life. So it can also be got wrong. However, we have expertise here in Hawke's Bay, so we really engage you to engage with that. And we also urge robust ecological investigation. Careful planning, work closely with DOC, Napier City Council, local iwi and other stakeholders, and do it well, but first and foremost, a wildlife refuge. Thank you.
So I'll just follow up, just give you my bit of my background. I'm a sort of background as an environmental engineer, so excuse me for taking that perspective. And in looking through your plan, I see some really good objectives, but I don't see anything that would be specific enough for me. I think you should have in your plan explicit quality objectives for the estuary and explicit timelines for achieving those objectives. I haven't been able to find that anywhere. If I'm mistaken, tell me. But I think saying we have these things and we're going to make things swimmable, things like that, I think that you need to be extremely specific as to what your objectives should be. One thing that we've said is that in doing the work, make sure that the tidal flow reaches the upper channel, that there's no interruption of that. And one thing that I would emphasize is that the impacts of contaminated urban stormwater discharges into the estuary need to be addressed. I don't see that anywhere, and the steps to mitigate these impacts should be clearly addressed. And as I say, overall, you should have a clear plan that identifies all the existing contaminant discharges into the estuary from urban and rural sources, how these discharges will be mitigated, and how the objectives, which you haven't defined, will be achieved. And not in the distant future, but at a time that we can regard as something that is something in our own timeline. Flood protection. I don't see anywhere where the serious issue of sea level rise is addressed in your plan. And I think this is a very serious issue for Hawke's Bay. And I think the wider community needs to engage with a very difficult issue. I think we're talking about something that has extremely severe consequences for our area. And there are basically 2 options, either withdraw or protect. And what is the process that you have for dealing with the low-lying lands in Hawke's Bay? And I'd say while withdrawal is an option, I think protection should be an option that is seriously considered. And we're talking megabucks from what I'm talking about here. But if you consider withdrawal, then the withdrawal means that the urban development goes onto existing vacant lands and will affect sensitive land areas in Hawke's Bay and agricultural lands and what have you. And I think we should be seriously talking about this issue, and I don't see it being addressed anywhere. And just 2 last thoughts, extemporaneous as my engineering background. I spent a year of postgraduate research on urban stormwater, so I do have this bee in my bonnet about that issue. And I sort of mentioned to Lynn, one thing, go into a hardware store, look at the shelves for the fertilizer and all the weed killers and all the rest of it. Where do you think all that stuff ends up? It all ends up in urban stormwater, and it all ends up being discharged to the receiving bodies. And if you don't address those quality issues, and I know from personal experience, you'll have all these nice objectives and you won't achieve the results. And the last observation is that I would say to Hawke's Bay Regional Council, you should not be about complying with national standards. You should be about doing what you feel what is the best thing for our region, and advocating that those standards be adopted on a wider basis. And again, I have seen this happen, coming from the local level and achieving significant change at a wider regional and national level. And I would strongly encourage Hawke's Bay Regional Council to take that approach, not just to be compliant at some distant unknown time in the future, but to have high objectives for short term and figure out how to do it and advocate that those standards be adopted on a wider basis. So thank you for the opportunity, and I hope I haven't lectured too much.
Thank you, Lynn and John. We have time for one question. Craig?
Thanks. Just regarding the standards or the targets and that, I presume you've submitted to Napier City Council regarding the runoffs,
that, yes,
great stuff. But there are targets of water quality now,
yes,
or national environmental standards, at least of water quality. So also the adherence to those, and your submission is we should address that and go, that's our benchmark. That's our floor at least. And we
absolutely, yeah, and I mean that is what has been done in other jurisdictions elsewhere in the world. The local level has said that is our floor, but we have decided to exceed that, and what has happened then is that the higher levels of government have then adopted those standards. So in my opinion, some New Zealand standards are a bit questionable, and so I think you should not just be about compliance, but saying what is the level of water quality that we want to achieve it, how are we going to do it, and when are we going to do that?
Accountability. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your submission. You didn't lecture us too much. Right, now we have Tom Kay on. Is he coming on Zoom, is he?
Yes, I'm here. Hopefully you can hear me.
Yep. Welcome, Tom.
Kia ora. Right, I assume it's the same for me, 10 minutes, and use it however I wish, I guess. So without ado, I'll start. So yes, I'm Tom. I work for Forest and Bird. I've met many of you. I'm from the Hawke's Bay region originally, in Wellington at the moment, and you can probably tell I'm from Hawke's Bay by the length of the submission that I put in on behalf of the branches, and thanks to the Napier branch who's just presented there, obviously. You probably all know Forest and Bird. We've been around since 1923, longer if you count some early iterations of us, and we have 3 branches in the Hawke's Bay region. And I can see council has put up some nice pictures there that I'm going to speak to in a second. But before I get there, I just want to, at risk of lecturing you for a moment and scaremongering, as I heard someone else say in the background earlier, I do just want to point out a few kind of key things at the start of the Forest and Bird submission, particularly in regard to Hawke's Bay Regional Council's role. Paragraph 6 of our submission states, basically from the RMA, that Hawke's Bay Regional Council has the responsibility of sustainably managing the natural and physical resources in its region to meet the reasonably foreseeable needs of future generations, safeguard life-supporting capacity of air, water, soil and ecosystems, and avoid, remedy or mitigate adverse effects on the environment. And I'm sure most of you appreciate that, and I'm hopefully going to be preaching to the converted when I say this, but I just want to point on the note of reasonable, foreseeable needs of future generations. Mike Joy recently wrote a piece in Radio New Zealand, which I also quote in paragraph 7, and he said, "School strikes for climate are not a fad and they're not going away. They should be a wake-up call. The kids are telling us they have had enough, that we grown-ups aren't grown up enough to do anything real about a planetary level threat for future generations." And I quote more of that in paragraph 11 of my submission, which says, their common conclusion is, in regard to scientists' warnings about the future of our planet, if human behaviour the world over doesn't change soon, there will be catastrophic biodiversity loss and untold amounts of human misery. And when a scientist says catastrophic biodiversity loss, it doesn't mean we might lose a panda. It means roughly head for the lifeboats, except that planets don't have lifeboats. We can either make hard changes or we can go down with the ship. And finally, in that regard, in 2019, a survey of youth mental health picked up feelings amongst our youth, and I quote this in paragraph 13, many students saw the future as bleak and felt that their generation was inheriting a broken world. Climate change was a strong theme. Some expressed a sense of facing a hostile world with insufficient adult support. Others felt older generations had created a mess and were leaving it to young people to find solutions. Now, I want to start by saying HBRC's got quite a good vision here in this long-term plan, and I'm pleased to have witnessed the relatively progressive approach you've taken on things like climate change. There's no more arguing about, not that saying that we ever had to argue with HBRC, but there's no arguing about whether climate change exists, kind of the extent of the issue. There is very clear recognition in this plan that climate change is a major and it needs to be addressed. Water quality issues are a major and need to be addressed. Biodiversity, all that kind of stuff is a major and needs to be addressed. And I'll just add to the Napier branch's submission, who noted around the Ahuriri estuary, that is an awesome opportunity for biodiversity in Hawke's Bay, you know, the equivalent of a Zealandia in your backyard, essentially. And we love the idea in principle, but it can only go ahead when there has been proper engagement with Department of Conservation and all those who are in the know around what is best to be done there for the restoration of that area. So we just want to put that caveat on that project. I want to jump ahead, seeing as I've only got limited time, to talking about freshwater issues with the Regional Council. Particularly, I want to emphasise, again, support for your increased compliance work that you've been doing of late, and support for future compliance work that could be done with increased resourcing through this plan. The work of the Future Farming Trust, which obviously is not solely within Hawke's Bay Regional Council, but is supported by, particularly the work that they've been doing with Barry Riddler and his E2M model, which is kind of years ahead of other farm systems, modelling systems, to really get people to the most ideal outcomes for farms in their systems, and your work with Lake Tutera to improve the conditions there. Now, on that one, I would like to say it's really important that we actually look at the cause of the problem and not just the effect, and I understand there are some marginal farms in that catchment, and there are some questions around whether those should be operating or not or whatever, but I appreciate Hawke's Bay Regional Council's intentions there, and support you doing more and more work and crossovers with Future Farming Trust and all that kind of thing in that area. The one thing I would take issue with on the freshwater front is it would have been nice to see the $1 million that the Regional Council has spent on fighting a water conservation order on the Naruroro River spent elsewhere, maybe on implementing some of the implementation plan for the tank plan change, or moving ahead with other plan changes for the regions, or doing more work with the Future Farming Trust or something like that. Finally, on freshwater, I just want to talk because there's so many things that are in this plan, a key thing for us at Forest and Bird is that when we're talking about freshwater or any environmental problem, we need to be treating the cause and not just the effect. So if we're going to, if we're going to go and restore the Ahuriri estuary and build a regional park or whatever it is, and whatever that looks like, we need to make sure we're putting the effort into actually treating the cause of the problem, which is, those industrial overflows, wastewater overflows, pollution from Napier urban areas, that we have sediment and phosphorus and nitrogen limits in place, that we actually have a way of dealing with the problem, not just the cause. And that goes for everything in terms of, if we're looking at managed aquifer recharge, then we also need to be looking at what are we doing with allocation and all that kind of thing. How much water should we be allocating? How much can we leave in the ground? All these kind of issues need to be thought about very carefully. Now, at risk of running out of time, I just want to jump to the pictures that I've got on the screen in front of you. So this is around flood protection and infrastructure. And I've been doing quite a lot of looking at pictures of rivers across time recently. And this is a picture of the Tukituki River at State Highway 50. about now, I imagine this image was taken in 2018 or something like that, but it's pretty much present time. And you can see the Tukituki channel there. And if we can flick to the next picture, it shows the river. Sorry, if you can go back, because you've gone, if we can go back and back again. Yep, there we go. So that is the river in 1943, before it was basically channelized with stop banks and erosion control planting, all that kind of stuff. So it had a much wider bed, it had much more room to move and erode and flood and dissipate its energy. And if we can just flick down through those slides, we can see, so that's the river now there. Then we move downstream slightly to what it used to be like, what it looks like now. And then we move downstream again, what it used to look like, lots of room to move, what it looks like now. In the next picture, very much channelized, straight, planted up, very little room, much lower capacity, obviously, and we can continue to flick downstream in the next picture, I think, to Waipukuro, I think this is township here, what the river used to look like, meandering, lots of habitat, native vegetation, all that kind of stuff. Probably some weeds in there as well, but anyway, and to what it looks like now, which is a straight line through the middle of the city, or the town, I'll call it a city. What I really want to emphasise there is that the Regional Council needs to take a much longer approach to its flood management and mitigation work. It's widely accepted across the world that this sort of channelization is not only terrible for biodiversity, the amount of riverbed there is significantly decreased, riparian areas are decreased, the ability for the river to recharge an aquifer is decreased because it's lost that gravelly connection, it's become a single straight line, can't dissipate flood energy, all that kind of stuff. There's a huge amount of evidence to show that that is the case. It's bad for ecology, but also that it is bad in terms of what you're actually trying to achieve with flood protection, which is to prevent erosion, to look after cities and people and people's health and infrastructure and all that kind of stuff. Because when these things fail, they fail really bad. And we've seen that happen across the country with the Fox River, with the Rangitata River, with Edgecombe, with Whanganui. And we put all this money into this stuff, and when they fail hard, and it costs us. And hopefully it doesn't cost life, but it could at some stage. And we know that rainfall is going to increase. We're going to get bigger storms. We're going to get bigger floods, and rivers are actually going to need more room to move. And that's a move we've seen internationally has actually been around a concept of giving room for the rivers to move and flood safely and erode without eroding the infrastructure that we've built. Because the other thing is that maintaining flood protection schemes like this are hugely expensive, which I'm sure you've seen through your planning. If we just flick to the next picture, I'm not sure where we go next. So this is just another example. This is part of the Naruroro River, which again now is, this is hundreds of meters wide. It's outstanding. It's amazing. There's huge amounts of braided river habitat there. But if we flick to the next picture and see what the river actually used to look like with that current channel against it, it had a lot more room to move, a lot more gravel, a lot more space to recharge the aquifer, all that kind of stuff. And it has been encroached on and kind of forced into this narrow corridor. And if we flick to the next picture, this is the kind of work that HBRC is doing in the river still, planting willow poles in the active gravel bed of the river and just forcing that river to be straighter and straighter. This is the river further downstream, just while we're on the concept of looking at how things used to be in our region and how they are now. This is where the Naruroro River actually used to flow into the Clive River. The bottom left there you can see, and you can just see this is 1943 when they've constructed this kind of floodway. And if you flick to the next picture, you can see where the river is now, going sort of straight down that channelized reach. So we've really changed these systems. Flood protection work has a massive effect on these areas. So that's something I want to emphasise. And this is a really great example of where this pays off or doesn't pay off. This is the Rangitata River in 1937, so Canterbury. 1937 on the left, you can see it has a two branches, one on the right and one on the left. There's a north branch on the right, south branch on the left. You can see the Rangitata River now, 2016, 2018. It's basically just been encroached on. There is some stop bank that limits the river's ability to get into that old channel. And then in 2019, when it rained, it poured, that stop bank or that piece of infrastructure that was stopping the river getting to that channel burst, and the river just went straight back to its 1937 channel. And that is, it wasn't unexpected. It is a floodway. and it's not owned by private landowners, but it is used and invested in by private landowners. Fences, fences, centre pivot irrigators, roads, all that kind of stuff on farms is there. So when the stuff fails, it fails hard, and the risk is that it will cost us infrastructure and life. I think that might be all the pictures there. This one's just for interest. Ahuriri estuary, what it used to look like around 1940, I think. I can't quite remember what it looks like now. In the next picture, I'll put that red to show you the encroachment. That's the industrial area that we've gone and put next to our estuary, and the yacht club and marina and road that we've kind of planted on top of the estuary. So again, just want to say, look, what's still there is quite impressive. But what we had before was really incredible, and we need to be very careful about how we're encroaching into these areas, whether it be rivers or coastal environments or whatever, and think much longer term about how we're going to retreat from or manage our position in these regions and our impact on them.
Thank you, Tom. I'm sorry, mate.
Yeah, I will leave it at that.
You are well over time, so we've given you a little bit of an extension.
Much appreciated.
Given your position, but we don't have any time for questions, but we do really admire your passion and commitment to these things, and I can assure you that councillors around this table are very conscious about all the issues that you've raised today. So thank you very much.
Thanks very much, appreciated.
You can't.
Let's go ahead. I just thought
No, you can't.
thought-provoking pictures I'd seen for a long time. Very good.
Okay. We have.
Thank you, Dom.
We have Richard Crode.
Or we could do a bit of a swap out here. So I've just got a couple of slides. I'm just going to pass these around. These are more kind of background information. Actually, I might keep a couple of those so that I can talk to them. Okay. So my name's Marie Fleming. I'm one of the trustees for the Sustaining Hawke's Bay Trust, or the Environment Centre Hawke's Bay. So I have to say that I'm not very experienced when it comes to these submissions. In fact, I've never done one before. And I also have been working in the construction industry, have been very tapped out recently. So
I thought we've seen you before.
Apologies for the reading, but I won't hold you up too long, so that's the good thing.
Okay, well, you have 10 minutes, so...
Okay. So, tēnā koutou e tēnei wā. My te reo is also pretty terrible pronunciation-wise, but I'll do my best. So, I whanau mai ahau I Aotearoa, Inari kei Waipurikau ahau I noho, I tipu ahau I raro I te kahuranaki monga, I takaro taha I te tukituki awa, ko te remuera te waka, ko ta iwi te iwi. So I was born in Christchurch, but I've lived in Hawke's Bay most of my life, and now live in Clive. And I think that the Clive is the centre of all of the Hawke's Bay universe. Anywhere you go in from here, from Clive, is a 5 or 10 minute drive. So, very proud to be here. So I'm talking on behalf of the Sustaining Hawke's Bay Trust. And so the Environment Centre, as most people know, it's been in Hawke's Bay for, actually I'm quite sure how long we've been around for, but quite a long time. And we're more or less self-funding, but we do have funding from Hastings District Council and Napier City Council in terms of supporting our goal, which is really to empower people to live in a sustainable way in Hawke's Bay. So that's what I'll be talking about it today, and really we just wanted to we're putting forward submissions on all of the long-term plans, and starting off with Hawke's Bay Regional Council, because they obviously impinge on the areas of interest to our trust and to our supporting community. So our primary comment really was regards to putting the environment first, and our goal certainly is around education as well. So what we'd really like to see in the regional plan is it working to put the climate first, and also where we can providing a forum for education as we go. So and certainly we'd like to see climate change at the heart of everything that's been done. So we're really pleased to see that there's a climate change ambassador that's going in place, but we'd really like to see more of the plans for the regional council being built around the climate and around climate change, rather than what seems to be at the moment is that there's the goals that's the projects that are falling out of it that are addressing climate change individually, rather than having the climate change at the centre and then having the projects sort of fall out of that. And we'd really like to see a climate change plan and policy that delivers key deliverables. So again, we'd like to see some key points in terms of a plan that will meet the climate change challenges, which we all recognise are going to be really significant over time. And also, you know, along with that community group engagement, so some of the ongoing schemes like the Plant Through Winter and the EnviroSchool projects we think are fantastic in terms of education, particularly when we're talking about educating children. And our goal historically has been doing a lot of zero waste work, and so we'd like to see some of these projects starting to build in zero waste as well. So if we're going to have planting schemes, then have that be zero waste. If you're going to be dealing with the Environmental Schools project, then build some composting around that so that we're starting to build that educational framework across the communities in Hawke's Bay. So generally, just to talk to the things that you were specifically asking for feedback on. So the Right Tree, Right Place project, and I have to say that as a trust, we don't hold a lot of specific expertise in all of those, so we really can only comment generally in terms of the support of the plans. And generally, we think that, you know, we're really happy with the work that's sitting inside this plan. We really like the Right Tree, Right Place program, and we support it and can see that it's got, you know, it's got multiple benefits in terms of the environment, landowners and the economy. And we're really keen on anything that's got a long-term benefit. So things like that mean that in the future we don't have to dredge the Clive River, that's going to support water quality in Honorary, things like that we think is really important to get that front end. We really think it's important to get native and diverse species in terms of the work that's been done. So starting to support some things like coppicing, for example, where we can keep the trees in place, mill them and continue and have those benefits. Starting to see things, so being in the building industry as well, we'd really like to see species like eucalyptus, macrocarpa, cypress, trees that when you go on to the next step, you know, they're still relatively short-life trees, so their milling cycle's not that long, but when you mill them, you're not looking at all these chemicals that are going into the environment. You know, they don't need to be preservative. We're not dealing with end-of-life disposal for them as well. So it'd be fantastic to see more investment, and certainly from the council point of view, getting that investment is really important because these trees have got a longer life, so they don't have that same sort of short rotation as pine. But the longer outcomes, yes, certainly from my point of view and our point of view, are fantastic. The water use one we think is really important. We really support the educational role. We think that's key in terms of having people do a better job with their water. And making sure that water is treated as a precious taonga to be valued through all stages of the year, not just in times of scarcity. So we're not just looking to build it in, you know, we start running out of water, so then we start doing something. We really would like to see waterways that support a healthy and diverse ecosystem, particularly as climate change increases drought and flood events, which are all going to have substantive negative effects on the whole environment. And some of those comments that Tom made about forest and bird and the river braiding, I think is really important in terms of having that diversity in place. And I'm a very keen swimmer, so I'm very keen on having our waterways be swimmable. I won't comment too much on the Tukituki one, which we generally support the removal of the gravel. Although I notice there's, you know, it seems to be more and more expensive getting building products out of the way, so I was quite surprised to see that there's such a big cost for a product that I think could be used around the place. So I'm going to have to find out a little bit more about that one. The Clive dredging one is probably one that's a little bit close to my heart, and I think there was certainly some questions that we had around that. I mean, we certainly note the importance of the Kohupātiki marae to tangata whenua in relation to the Treaty of Waitangi, but I guess investing a lot of money in dredging the river up to the marae when actually the cause is up the river, is something that we'd like to see, more clarity around that kind of cost benefit of doing the work there versus doing some more work up in the Karamu stream or doing the work further up in terms of the community through there. Coming on the public transport, do you want to support that? The Honorary Regional Park, again, we think is a fantastic initiative. I'm also an ocean swimmer, so I do a lot of swimming around that area, so I'm very keen to see that part being cleaned up. And as part of Green Drinks, we went and had a look at some of the areas where the birds were, and the biodiversity in that area is something that we just really want to see supported. And I think it's really important in these areas to see that it's around the biodiversity and setting up that environment and then the recreational use of it. I think the recreational use of it needs to follow alongside rather than be put front and forward. And I think that is just about me. Thank you very much.
Right, we have time for one question.
Okay.
Well,
yeah, you mentioned a couple of times about the key deliverables you want in this climate change plan to address.
Yeah.
What's an example of some deliverables, specifically what we're not doing now?
I think seeing some more timelines around some of the activities. I have to say I'm not some timelines, some quantifiable things in terms of what the likely climate change is going to be in those areas. Specific. Yeah, no, actually, I'm afraid I can't really give you too much more detail on that. I'm happy to get something to you in writing, but I can't produce anything off the top of my head right this moment.
thank you. We're out of time now, so
Okay.
we really appreciate the work you do down Karamu Road there. I drive past you often, and
Thank you very much.
thank you very much. Okay, I do pop in sometimes. Birds New Zealand, Bernie Kelly. Welcome, Bernie. You have 10 minutes. You can use it how you wish.
Yes, thank you, Rex.
You can wait for
I'm the Bernie Kelly, Regional Representative of Birds New Zealand. What was, you may have known as the Ornithological Society, changed our name. And I could declare, just as a sidebar, just that I'm a biodiversity ranger with the Department of Conservation. But this in no way is representative of their view or anything to do with them, really. It's just that I have been a regional rep for New Zealand, Birds New Zealand, Hawke's Bay for the last 7 or 8 years. And my submission, in our submission, as you can see, we have ticked that box around the regional park status, offering a kind of that status to the Untitled estuary. And we're probably in the camp of rather having something done rather than nothing done, and we're kind of, I can see, and we can all see, probably everybody in this room can see that we do need some progress around the Honorary estuary. Birds New Zealand, their biggest contribution to the Honorary estuary is participating in one of the longest data set gathering exercises in the country. And the Honorary estuary is part of that in terms of the National Wader Census. So we're going to quite a few different locations in the Honorary estuary twice a year, summer and winter, and we're counting the birds. And so we've got a really good idea about what's there and how that's playing out. And of course, long-term data sets are really important. So that's good information that we have and are contributing to. So we've just got, like a stake in the Honorary estuary especially. I guess that's like people have been saying, we tick that box, but the caveats are around just how that's going to play out. And I feel, my feeling is, the submission details were around it being, this regional park has been start, like it's a kick start. And to me, that's not a total plan. It's just that are you asking the general public to just, do the general public think it's a good idea? So in terms for Birds New Zealand, we think regional parks give areas a bit better conservation status. So that can only be a good thing. The caveats are just around how that's going to play out, because it's multi-agency. So you've got Napier City Council as well. We've also submitted to them. So in my experience, I think it's going to be really good to actually see this is a perfect opportunity to have some really good collaboration between this agency, the Regional Council, the Napier City Council, and the Department of Conservation around the Ahuriri estuary. And that sometimes, to me, has been a little bit disjointed over the years. I think we've seen, it's like the little silos that this one's doing that, this one's doing that. That's not to say that the Regional Council haven't done some extremely good work there, because I know they have. I've even helped them with the different surveys that the Regional Council have actually done in the estuary. So essentially, those are the caveats about just what we're asking is, can Birds New Zealand, be, and I can't speak for the other groups that we are actually in quite close collaboration with in terms of the Ahuriri Protection Society, and Forest and Bird. We're in amongst that kind of group of people, and we're communicating quite well with each other. So I think together we can actually help, and we would really like to be at the table when the plans are going to be hashed out, because I'm sure there's just ideas at the moment, but as everyone's asking for detail, but the detail just needs to be fine-tuned, and during that fine-tuning process, hopefully groups like ours, completely volunteers, can be actually helpful with that process. So yeah, that's essentially what I'm here to say, is that regional parks are okay, but there are those caveats around just how that's going to take place. Because I live in Waiparaku, Clive, and I've seen that regional park there grow, and I've seen it right from before and now, and I can see a lot of good work being done. But sometimes I just on the edges I can see stuff that's happened there that is probably not ideal. So yeah, that's essentially all I'm saying, is that. Yeah, we'd like to be at that table when the fine-tuning plans take place. Yeah.
Thank you, Bernie. And I'm sure you should be too. Questions from councillors? Well.
Yeah. So you're against the gravel extraction Apatoki took for the protection of the birds. That's fair enough. So in terms of flood protection, what would you suggest as an alternative?
Oh, it's not my level of expertise. Yeah, I have participated in bird counts, banded dotterel counts in that part of the river. And if you're extracting gravel out of a braided river, anyway, that probably wouldn't be a good thing. I've seen examples on the Ngāroa where you've got your gravel extraction happening, like mining there, and the birds just stop, and then they start again. So that's where I'd be coming from with that, in terms of any gravel extraction up in the upper Tuki River, because we do know that they've got pretty good numbers of black-fronted dotterel, banded dotterel nesting there. So, but I'm not an engineer. So, but when I hear gravel extraction on a big scale up there, I'd say we get pretty worried.
Can it be managed?
Pardon?
Can it be managed, the extraction in conjunction with birds nesting? Time of the year?
Possibly time of the year. Time of the year, yeah. Yeah, that happens now already, I think, with the beach raking.
Yeah, because there is across the world, what they do is actually, if they decide an area that needs to be mined or gravel extracted, they actually make sure that the bird's actually not attracted to it to start with. So they actually find other places to nest, and therefore you've then got a bird-free area. Would that be something that would be acceptable?
It's hard to say. I can't speak for the birds, because I know in different roading projects around in Auckland that New Zealand dotterel have just gone and nested straight in amongst the diggers there. But just in my own experience on the Ngāroro, yeah, there's been a definite, stop and a start. It's pretty hard to birds really nest, at a certain time of the year, and they're quite site loyal as well, so they will go back to those sort of sites. And I'm a bit vague on actually the details around just the distance that you're talking about, just how much area you're talking.
Thank you, Bernie.
Okay,
No more questions, and from our position, you do speak for the birds.
Yes.
So thank you. Clint, we have your pleasure again, Clint, on a topic that is close to all of our hearts, I think.
And hopefully the presentation.
You're going to play that video and make us all cry.
No.
Welcome, Clint. You know the rules. You've got 10 minutes, and you can save some of that time for councillors' questions, or not. Tell me when you're ready to go.
Thank you. Tēnā koutou katoa, called Clint Deckard Takawingoa. Today I'm representing the Inglesbush Community Trust. Inglesbush is a relatively small dock reserve just off the edge of one of the pictures that Tom Kay had there on the Tukituki River, just west of Highway 50. Inglesbush was created as bush in 1984. It's nationally significant. It's home to bats, spotless crake, and one of the last stands of kahikatea. I suppose before we go any further, I need to first of all express my appreciation to the Regional Council, Chairman Graham, Councillor Foley and Councillor Ormsby generously took a lot of time out of their busy lives to come and visit the reserve last year, and from that have followed up, and I appreciate the support from the Chief Executive and staff, and acknowledge that there is, as we speak, a lot of work going on this issue. And I would also express my appreciation to the Department of Conservation, who now, perhaps a little bit late, have certainly taken the bit between the teeth, and with the Regional Council are working together, and I'm sure, councillors, you'll get feedback from that relatively soon. Other way, the reserve, one of the main features is a pretty large escarpment that about 10 to 20 metres, and it continues right along. Particularly this area of the reserve here is fed by, or was fed by, a series of significant springs. The farmer used to have a weir there where he collected the water for his farm supply. It never ran out. The spring system continues, that I know, for at least 5 kilometres along the escarpment. That special feature that's given the reserve heaps of water has led to a almost pure stand of kahikatea at the bottom of the escarpment. I suspect also the amount of water and the steep escarpment was probably the thing that saved that little bit of remnant of bush from the sawyers, who managed to get rid of all the rest of it. Sorry. That's a Google Earth photo of the reserve from 2019. I'm sorry for the quality of this. I have in the last 3 days learnt how to fly a drone, collect photos and stitch them together. But if we go between 2019 and yesterday, the white things in the bush there are dead kahikatea. Again, we'll just go back, 2019, yesterday. A little bit closer, that's towards the western end of the reserve, again 2019, yesterday. We've had scientists there last week. They were surprised at the speed of the decline and the extent of it. The trees that are dead there are trees that were sitting in standing water. The springs produced an area of water and that flowed along. The Ashcott water race at the other end of the reserve trapped it, or what water was there, and took it out of the reserve. So the trees at that end of the reserve have been dying, and there are very few kahikatea left now, that ever since the water race went in the 1950s. The other end of the reserve, yeah, it's just been so quick. Yep. Why? Some of the closest bores there show you the level of the water. If we assume that the springs there are quite shallow, 5 metres, if you drew a line on that graph there, you'd see that in years gone by, those springs would never, the aquifer would never have dropped below that level. Now, you can see not only is the aquifer dropping, but the amplitude of the drop is enormous. So now, springs at 5 metres are running dry every year and for longer. Another set of bore, similar area, and just a graph of water extraction. Certainly not as simple as that. Yeah. At the moment, I think the problem has been defined: lack of water, failed springs. What do you do? And that's where they're at. Thank you.
Thank you, Clint. Martin.
Hey, thank you, Clint, for presenting to us and for your passion for this cause. It is heartening to see all of the community groups that come to this council doing so much to champion issues that need our attention. Can I just clarify the graph that you've included within your submission? Is that from the Managed Aquifer Recharge report?
The pre-feasibility one, yep.
So your message is that you don't see MAR. There's an irony that you've used an MAR report to reveal the inherent problem here, which is over-allocation, right? That's your concern?
Well, yes, I think over-allocation and equity of allocation, I think, yes, that's the elephant in the room.
And you're putting to us that rather than go down the Managed Aquifer Recharge route, clawing back water allocations on some equitable basis would be more efficient or more effective? Is that your proposition?
Well, coming from CHB, we've had a little bit of experience with innovative engineering solutions to our problems down there, floating wetlands being one of them. So we're, perhaps you can understand a little bit of scepticism about engineering, innovative engineering solutions. Look, it's not as simple as, I think if you stopped extraction tomorrow, I don't think the aquifer would return to where it was. It's simply not as simple as that. The amount of wet areas that in our environment that were there to recharge the aquifer, we've gotten rid of. So the two things, water in and water out, not only is there lots of water out, but there's also less water in. So there's lots of things that need to be done. Yeah. Will we ever get the aquifer back to the level that it was, say, 1951?
I'm just wondering whether you'd accept on the journey towards that a small element of aquifer recharge that might even support a resource like this could be an interim solution.
Absolutely, I hope it is. I suppose my one message to you and my one fear is that you will see the little bit of conservation and irrigation and managed aquifer recharge as problem solved, and allocation and equity of allocation will be kicked down the road yet again.
Thank you, that's very clear, and thanks for that series of questions.
Thank you. Any other questions? Sheriff, we have one quick question.
But I don't want to take it away from Will Foley, though, who's the...
No.
You okay?
Yeah.
Okay. With climate change, do you think that water storage for the benefit of the environment, I mean, the emphasis on the benefit of the environment, will be beneficial in this particular area?
Could very well be.
Could very well be.
As in
You could-
many things, the devil is in the details, though.
That's right.
Okay.
Thank you, Clint. That was a great presentation, and I've circulated your video to a lot of people, and it was an amazingly good video. Thank you very much, and thanks for your passion around this project.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
And it'll be enhanced with drone footage, no doubt.
No.
Excellent.
Okay, biodiversity, Hawke's Bay. Debbie Monaghan. Charles too. And Charles, welcome. And the main man. So welcome, Debbie and Charles. Each submitter has 10 minutes, and you can use the whole 10 minutes if you like, or you can be shorter and get questions from councillors. Up to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, councillors, for the chance to speak on behalf of Biodiversity Hawke's Bay. My name is Charles Doherty, as your chairman's noted, and I want to acknowledge our general manager, Debbie Monaghan, who's here with me. The two of us prepared this together, this presentation together. I'll speak fairly generally, but also about some specifics. I want to start by noting that this draft plan comes at a time that's in which the world really, but certainly Hawke's Bay, confronts massive challenges to nature. We're in the middle of two crises that have been called existential. Neither of them is named COVID. One is the climate change and one is biodiversity extinction. We're in the middle of what's sometimes called the sixth biodiversity extinction, potentially rivaling that at the time of the dinosaurs 65 million years ago. The significance is obvious. Nature is the infrastructure for human life. Clean water, clean air, restoration of soils, flood protection, as we've heard, all arise from the goods that nature provides for us. And nature is also the infrastructure for the economic foundation of society. And here in Hawke's Bay, that means particularly agriculture and tourism. As you know, the natural environment here is seriously degraded, and unless it's restored to health, a sustainable future for our businesses and our society are not possible. If I could have the next slide, thank you. That's a good half of them.
That's a good half. Yeah.
I've stopped the clock while we're sorting this out. I think because it's been PDF'd.
So this is a PDF. It's not working very
Had the same problem on Stella.
I sent it on
I did too.
PowerPoint, I thought.
The one with the file's been saved.
I can go ahead and speak. I don't know.
Ready.
Might have to.
Yeah.
If you'd like, I'll go ahead and just press on.
Yeah, you need to press on.
With these, and if the slides emerge, great. Thank you. Biodiversity Hawke's Bay has two primary goals. The first, as you might guess, is restoration of the biodiversity, the plants and animals of this region that are seriously threatened. The second of these is about humans. It's sustainable prosperity for the people in this region that depend on nature and the services that nature provides us. And while my focus today will be on biodiversity quickly, I would note that climate change is part of that context. You can't fix one without the other. I've noted in slides you can't see four groups that we think are critical to success, and I'll tell them quickly. One are community-led environmental groups. Nationally, there's on the order of 4,000 or possibly significantly more community-led groups that focus on the local environment in their region, some local, some national. And they are supported by literally hundreds of thousands of people around the country. Two other groups that I think are in some ways are quite similar and critical are Tangata Whenua and the farming community. Both of these groups have intergenerational interests in the land and will be there for as long as we can foresee the future. The fourth group are cities, and I think last week Professor Clarkson spoke with you about that. Cities are absolutely critical to biodiversity restoration. About 85% of people in New Zealand, possibly more now, live in cities, and the only connections they may have to nature are if nature is in cities, and so we need to remember that. I'd point out in particular that these four groups share a critical value, one critical set of values, and those are their perspectives are long-term. I mentioned the intergenerational nature of perspective of farmers in Tangata Whanua, but cities have the same thing, and so do the groups of people that form these community-led groups. So what we would like is to see this long-term plan represent a significant step, but only one in what turns out to be a series of steps much longer than political cycles or election cycles. And with that context in mind, I would point out that we're here to support the plan. We think it's a good plan and has lots to offer. There are three aspects I'd particularly want to mention. The first of these is the Right Tree, Right Place pilot project. That project seems to me to be the first step in repairing damage of both government policies of 30, 40 years ago that tried to put into production land that never should have, but really also are the first step in setting right the damage that humans have done in the last century and a half and possibly beyond. It's a great initiative. The second one is the Honorary Regional Park. It's time to make a start on that. Great cities, if you remember, have great parks, every one of them. And so if you think, I heard Zealandia mentioned, Zealandia has occurred over a time frame of only about 25 plus years. Wellington has been changed dramatically in that time. It would be impossible to imagine Wellington without Zealandia. Hagley Park is another one, and it shows the diverse uses that these public lands can be put to. Hagley Park may be good for biodiversity. It proved to be critical in times of earthquake and in times of terrorism down there. They have, these places are places for people to gather and use for purposes well beyond recreation and biodiversity. Other cities in the world that have great parks, well, New York City and Central Park. London has so many that it was there was a project a few years ago to consider making London a national park. And Moscow, it might surprise you to know, has about 50% of its land in parkland, quite extraordinary. In New Zealand, the standard is that Professor Clarkson recommends is about 10%. I believe both Hastings and Napier are now at about 2%. Before going on, I want to acknowledge costs. We know there's a lot of money that rates have risen. These will require money, and they will require money into ongoing decades. But remember, we're proposing to repair damage a century and a half. I don't know if it's in any of your reports, but there is an economic literature that looks at return on investments for environmental investments, and those turn out to be surprisingly high. By factors of 2 to 10, these projects pay off in various ways for themselves, and I think that's what Wellington, for example, is now seeing with Zealandia. They have to be long-term, but they work. I'd also, if I had my slide here, I'd show you, introduce you to Belinda Slate. Dr. Slate is our new Community Facilitation Officer. She's funded by Department of Conservation money for the next few years. She's our expression of the need to engage with the community. Belinda and all of us really will be able to strongly support this your plan. Belinda's a missionary for biodiversity and for the people-related goals of your long-term plan, and we're pleased to be able to contribute to her to that. And I'd like to just finish by going back to your own words, and they would have been on the screen, but I think your draft plan is an important first step in what's a long journey. And if I could just conclude, if you'll indulge me, I'll quote from the preface to the plan, which is entitled Action Now to Protect the Future, and it's signed by your chair and chief executive. And a few words extracted from this are as follows. Hawke's Bay has a legacy of environmental issues and a changing climate. Our natural surroundings have seen too little investment for too long. The task before us is huge, and we recognize we can't do it alone. We recognize the value of our partnerships, so this plan increases funding for expert advice from our Tangata Whenua partners and offers greater engagement with landowners. And I would simply conclude by saying that's right on target. We agree entirely. We appreciate your understanding of the issues and the vision. The situation is dire, and the need for action is urgent. So this report is ambitious. We think it points in the right direction. Please aim high with the intention of going higher. Just go for it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Charles. Sheriff.
Yeah. Hopefully, thank you very much for your brilliant presentation and the thoughts behind it. And hopefully, we'll be able to get your PowerPoint so we can have a look at it. Have you also, 2 questions, have you also submitted to the long-term plan of Hastings District Council and Napier City Council? Yes. Because you're no doubt aware that they're actually intending to increase their parking spaces in both those urban areas, which is just absolutely, in this time and place, there's no room for that. Yeah. And here we have got 2 TAs who are actually doing it. So keep up the good work, and hopefully you'll be speaking passionate.
So our comment in respect of that was encouraging a limit on impervious surfaces, that there's ways of actually, if you like, enabling car parking without actually putting total kind of impervious surfaces on. So, and Hastings actually does have a very passionate person who's actually encouraging this behaviour as well.
Thank you.
I'll be complaining to them about continuing to build houses at sea level.
Thank you very much. We probably don't have time for another question, but really appreciate you coming along and all the work that you do in this space, which and hopefully we are assisting you as much as we can.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Stu Burden. Stu here? Yes.
Finished.
Welcome, Stu. You would have heard that every submitter has 10 minutes, and you can use the 10 minutes how you wish.
Thanks. So my name is Stu Bird, and I have a small horticultural block running between Lawn Road and Tukituki River in the Matahiwi area, I suppose you call it, where I grow olives and own an orchard that's leased out. I'm here to talk rates. Someone has to do it, so I'm concerned at the rapidity of rates increases. While some of this is due to the way land has been revalued in my area, local councils seem to continue to target increases above the rate of inflation and the local government cost index. And the Regional Council has signalled particularly large increases in the 10-year plan. Not mentioned, I'm not going to say it's hidden, but not mentioned in the summary document, but on the last page of the full consultation document, excluding the auditor's report, is the 10-year rates forecast. So 21-22, 19.5%, 22-23, 15%, 24-25, 10%, 11.4%, 7.2%, 6.9%, and trading off slightly from there. Having the large increases first, of course, ensures more modest increases later generate a great deal more rates and costs to the ratepayer. So that's a compound increase of 50% in 3 years and projected doubling of rates in 7 years. To use myself as an example, my regional council rates have gone from $312 in 2014-15 to $889 in 2021, and for the life of the long-term plan could be about $1,800, a 6-fold increase. Add the Hastings Council rates, which are currently about 3,143 next year, likely heading up to about 4,000 within 5 years. So some of you are thinking $5,000, $6,000 rates piffle compared to rents, compared to salaries. I'm happy to reply to that notion. In contrast, the Taranaki Regional Council has signal increases averaging about 4% in their 21-23 long-term plan, even off existing modest rating base. The thing about rates is it's a cost you simply have to pay. You can't go to an alternative supplier, do the work yourself, go without, use your ingenuity to find a different way or system. It's therefore beholding on councils to be as efficient and accountable as they possibly can. businesses and households have to budget to their income, and councils should set more realistic income expectations and budget to that. Perhaps the council needs to take a deeper look into how it operates and spends money. The council's rationale for its increases seems to be that we have a climate emergency, there's a backlog of environmental issues to address, and well, regional council rates are low compared to the district council, so people won't mind. We'll tell them how much a week it is, and that won't make it seem so bad. This is often backed up with fairly self-affirming surveys where you're typically asked, do you want to take this action? Or it's implied, do you hate the environment? I think most people are concerned about climate change. I certainly am. I don't believe the council itself can affect much to lessen climate change, but certainly mitigating the effects is a fair goal. It certainly doesn't seem to be too interested in maintaining its drainage schemes, which I thought would be a priority in a changing climate. And yes, I'm taking a dig, pun intended, at our local drains. And while there are large environmental issues to address in Hawke's Bay, perhaps this council should be content with a legacy of direction and progress. Some environmental changes are easy and straightforward to effect, etc., clearing and replanting streams and wetlands. I would put that in that category. And some obviously harder and more complex. The plans projects are mostly meritorious. The subsidised Upper Tookie gravel seems a no-brainer. I take the other gentleman's point about bird life and so forth. But it seems that rivers contained by stock banks have to be considered to some extent as hybrid rivers, and you just have to control them. The Clive River has to be done, but perhaps needs some kind of long-term solution there. Now, one of the problems I see is today's councils have a fairly large machinery of governance. While in the past a local county council management might have been essentially the likes of clerks, engineers and overseers, modern demands with complex laws, regulations and science seems almost to require a substantial corporate-style team. And while it may seem outside the remit of this hearing, I think it's fair to suggest it seems ridiculous to have these structures replicated 5 times for such a small population base in Hawke's Bay, with that associated cost, not to mention the 50 councils and 4 mayors. I do compliment the council in setting a good example and direction in many areas with a more global and thorough environmental plan than perhaps in the past. I have done my best to follow the council's lead when given, but I do see this trajectory of rates increases to be an existential problem in its own right. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stu. Questions? Craig?
Yeah, thanks, Stu. Believe you me, many of us feel your pain. You pointed out about when you carve it down and you look at the various projects, on their own, they all kind of stand up and that's a pretty good idea.
I don't criticise the council's general approach, no.
Yeah, no, I know. So thanks for that, because actually around the table we often, which of these could we not do without perhaps, and they all seem to land in that same basket. Mm. Then you go, there's the big bogey of bureaucrats and staff and the explosion, and then times 5 across the entire bay. Point very, very well made, and a lot of sympathy around this table on that one. As ask on the LTP, one of the things we did a wee bit different, page 5 I think in the flyer, we broke the costs down for the various projects. A large part of it is some COVID stuff and stuff we just have to do because of who we are for regulation coming from Wellington, like it or not. Because if we don't do it, we'll end up spending a whole lot more in court defending something that hadn't gone through proper process. So I guess, are you making similar sentiments to the other councils you pay rates to? And I guess there's not a huge question there other than your points are felt deeply, and we actually have struggled with them to also try and aspire to what you by and large agree with.
It just, I sort of feel, I class myself as a smallholder, you would say. But through generations of our family, the land has always been used for productive purposes, and we've tried to look after the land. But it sort of feels that, I'll be honest with you, I invested in an olive block that put a fair bit of time and money in, and I'm starting to make a reasonable return, except that since it started probably from that 14-15 period, and with rates increases and that, I feel I'd probably be doing a lot of work there just to plough the money just into rates.
Still, I fully appreciate that and understand that, and your sentiments are made well and clear.
Thank you.
Any other questions from councillors? Thank you, Stu.
Points well made, Stu.
Yeah, points well made. James Ryan, via Zoom, is it? Oh.
There he is.
They're extra.
Familiar face.
It's not James Ryan, though.
Yeah, I've had a name change.
Straight up or straight down?
We'll see. Sideways. So I'm Steve Wynne-Harris. I'm a sheep and beef farmer down there near Tekapo, and I'm chairman of the East Coast Region's Balanced Farm Environment Awards. My position's a voluntary position. Kate Taylor to my right also lives at Tekapo, but we're married to different people. And she is now a trustee of the Farm Environment Trust, currently a district councillor also for Central Hawke's Bay. And she was my regional coordinator, did the donkey work for running the awards in this region, of which Hawke's Bay and Gisborne are combined. We're the only region in these awards that have the two territorial authorities. And joining us somewhere should be James Ryan. Is he going to appear? Is he going to become bigger, or just a little man down there in the corner? James Ryan he's the general manager of the Farm Environment Trust. He's down in Christchurch, and he's going to give us a brief presentation, and then we welcome your questions.
Okay, the floor is yours, James.
Tēnā koutou, good afternoon everybody. Thanks for giving us the opportunity to speak to our submission. We'll try and keep it short and sweet. It's really an opportunity for us to thank you for your ongoing partnership. And as you appreciate, it's also a good opportunity to get a couple of local characters along to your hearings this afternoon. So, as Steve mentioned, I manage the New Zealand Farm Environment Trust. It's a charity that's set up to promote sustainable farming. We're best known for running the Balanced Farm Environment Awards. And our purpose is to champion good practice. So we showcase examples of good practice that farmers are implementing in order to inspire other farmers and growers with their sustainability journey. We're funded by a range of agribusinesses, and we also enjoy the generous support of regional councils throughout the country. Just a couple of points I wanted to make this afternoon. We're very committed to maintaining the Balanced Farm Environment Awards, but we're also making some refinements to our program. In particular, we're looking to place more focus on the feedback process. So currently all participants in our program receive a feedback report. I think going forward, that's going to become more important for us as we professionalise the feedback that we give to participants in our program. And really, as part of that process, we're seeing how we can align our criteria with other industry initiatives like farm environment planning and the soon-to-be-released guidance from MPI around integrated farm planning. So that's something that I've discussed briefly with your staff. And look, you'll appreciate as well as anyone that farmers and growers are facing a range of challenges. And that's why we think the programs that we run have perhaps never been more important. Whilst some farmers will implement change as a result of regulatory or market pressures, we like to think that we operate in that part of the spectrum where they're responding to voluntary change because they recognise it's good for their local environment, it's good for their local community, and in many cases it's also good for their bottom line. So, look, so my role is really to be a point of contact for our key partners up and down the country, but it's really down to the commitment of our local characters, our volunteers throughout the country, that the that our program is successful. And they don't do it for fame and fortune. They do it because they're passionate about sustainable farming, and they recognise the need that New Zealand's future prosperity in many respects lies with farmers producing goods to the highest environmental standards. We've quite recently held our national function where we give out an accolade, and this year we've appointed Linda and Evan Potter from Central Hawke's Bay as our national ambassadors for sustainable farming. So I'll be catching up with the Potters again in a couple of weeks. One of the things that I noticed was that when they received their accolade, they spoke really positively about their relationship with Hawke's Bay Regional Council. And I think, I deal with regional councils up and down the country, but it's apparent to me that your catchment team, your land managers are held in really high regard, not just in the region, but throughout the country. So I thought that was worthwhile passing on. So look, that's it from me. Between us, I'm really happy to respond to any questions, but I just wanted to take the opportunity today to thank you for your support, and we look forward to working in partnership with you.
Thank you, James. And Steve and Kate, so questions from councillors? Oh, sorry. Mark.
Yeah, look, thank you, James. Just the question of the topic of integrated farm planning that you raised with the MPI guidance. Can you just talk to me a little bit about integrated farm planning?
So it's an MPI-led project. Your staff may well know more about it than me, but certainly the Minister for Agriculture has talked about the need to try and align some of the industry initiatives. Whether integrated farm planning achieves that, I think it remains to be seen, but I understand that will be more details shared from MPI within the next month. So that's one of a number of many initiatives that we're trying to keep abreast of to ensure that the feedback we give to farmers is consistent with some of these other programs underway.
Great.
Thanks. Thanks very much. A few of us actually went to the Potters Field Day, and it was fantastic. Love what you do there. But I thought I'd just ask you guys, if there's a lot going on in things water in Central Hawke's Bay, led by the council down there in their LTP, I think it's just passed or very close to being passed, I believe. Are there any thoughts you can have from the kind of the balance type point of view as to thoughts or suggestions as to how this council can work with your community and or the council down there just to better achieve these environmental balanced with business positive outcomes, because it's a lone voice often, and it's when you go to these farms that they're just so cool and so good, passionate people just get on with the job and making a dollar along the way and being great for the environment. So is there suggestions for us particularly pertinent to what we're doing in Central Hawke's Bay, or planning to do at least?
I would throw the technical side of that answer back to James, but from my point of view, the Regional Council is a great vehicle to help us tell the stories that need to be told, to share the good work that's being done, not just with water but across the board. But I'll throw that back to James if he wants to answer on a more technical level.
I think that field day is a good example. It's joint storytelling. We validate each other and show good examples that we can demonstrate to the wider farming community that there are opportunities, that there is a pathway through some of the challenges that they're facing.
The the requirements of the Plan Change 6 and as a practising farmer I'm speaking now, it sort of preempted the national requirements. In fact, it's more stringent in places. So you're asking about Central Hawke's Bay. We're well on that track, either voluntary or not. And then these awards, working with you guys, because we both aspire. We've got the same objectives: wise and sustainable land use. So as you say, the Potters and other award winners and just the people going through the process and the awards night that some of you have been to are important parts of just spreading that message and getting more people on board who maybe are a little bit slower to come to the table. So yeah, it's the relationship, the partnership we've got. We don't see you as sponsors, but as partners, because we're both going in the same direction. And I just want to reiterate what James said about your land management team. I mean, truly, it's a jewel in the crown. I'm sure you're aware of that. But those guys, I've worked with them for 40 years now as a practicing farmer and doing my own sustainable work. But they are really good. They're a great team, and you should be very proud of them.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Steve. We've got another time for one quick question. We're actually cutting it fine, but if there is a quick question. Otherwise, thank you very much, Steve and Kate and James. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Pauline. You're on your feet. By crikey.
Wasting time.
Running behind.
Only 5 minutes. It's been a long morning, though.
What do you mean only 5 minutes? 10 minutes?
Right?
I think the chairman was looking at the other clock.
I haven't clicked the button yet, Pauline, so don't panic.
Please. One of those and one of those.
Just have as
Thanks very much,
guest lunch
Larry.
speaker if you like.
Tell me when you're ready, Pauline.
I will.
You know the rules.
I want to make sure you can hear me. Thank you for this opportunity to speak to you. Following on from the speak before last, we may well see our rates drop if central government has their way. There are two things Guardians of the Aquifer are asking of you today. One is oppose the government plan to amalgamate management of our water services, and the second one is oppose the government plan to have us hand over our water assets to a new so-called council-controlled organisation, or a CCO. It's time to fight for recognition, in our view, fight for the recognition of the pure water that we source from the secure areas of the Hiratonga Aquifer. And that's where you come in. That's the role of the Regional Council, is to ensure that our aquifer provides safe, potable water for us to drink here in Hastings and Napier. In 2016, you'll remember, only the two council bores in Havelock North were suspect. Our aquifer, the Hiratonga Aquifer, is not suspect. Last year, thank you, Napier City Councillors signed the MOU with the government for $11.5 million on the clear understanding that we would not be forced to hand over our assets to a regional entity. No one ever got sick drinking Napier's water. Napier is proud of its management of our drinking water, and rightfully so, for decades. But now we stand to lose $2 billion of water assets in Hawke's Bay. That's if we meekly bow down to government pressure and hand over our assets to a CCO. Now, you'll be aware that a CCO manages Wellington's water. And you should be aware of what's gone wrong down there. I've handed out on loan a copy of the Napier City Council submission that we will be speaking to on the 9th of June. And I'd like to refer you to page 7 of that. And when we finished here, I'd like those back, because they're actually for me to hand out to Napier City Council.
I like that recycling.
And if you're interested in what we've got to say, you can go on your internet, and you'll see I sent you all an email, including James Palmer, the CEO, on Friday. So you've got this on your computer. So page 7. In August, Hawke's Bay Today published our letter. Headline, "There's a catch to water money. Central government is dangling a $50 million carrot in front of local councils in Hawke's Bay. But the catch is we will have to sign over our right to own and control our water supplies. Now, at the 2016 Havelock North Water Inquiry, we were told the whole country should follow the Wellington water model. And further down, if the CCO model of water management is such a dismal failure in Wellington, why would the rest of us want to follow the Wellington model? Far better to keep water management in-house as we've always done in Napier. More than half of Wellington's city's pipes need replacing, according to an article in Dominion Post 2 days ago. That's in Wellington. That's not here in Napier. If you turn to page 12, you'll see I refer to a former councillor, Tom Belford. I'm not sure where Tom gets his evidence to keep saying that Napier's water supply is antiquated and decrepit, quote unquote. The council's water safety plan clearly states, I quote, a 2014 asset management review concluded that there was no indication of a water system renewal backlog, and the operational service history provided no indication of any major service delivery issues with the water network. And if that's not enough, so in May 2017, under the former CEO Wayne Jack, Napier was permanently chlorinated, ignoring the findings of that independent asset review in 2014. Rumours started. Was Napier going to be another Havelock North? This is ridiculous. If you turn to page 21, you'll see a photo of this article from Hawke's Bay today, headlined, Water Tests Negative for E. coli. That's at Park Island, which was where Wayne Jack decided Napier's whole network needed to be permanently chlorinated. But in that article, Bill Dalton, then Mayor, explained that under the new water testing regime that they'd panicked and introduced after Havelock North got contaminated, under the new water testing regime, the network would be chlorinated even for positive readings that were, quote, on the edge of detection, unquote. Anything just above 0 would get chlorinated. This is absolute nonsense, a total overreaction. And now today, Napier City Council's being told by their consultants, we're being warned that we could lose our secure bore status, meaning we can't go chlorine-free. And this is where you come in. We're asking you, please, support Napier City Council's efforts to gain exemption from mandatory chlorination. 1, we ask you to collaborate with Napier City Council to identify what might be contributing to the presence of so-called young water in Napier City Council boards. And James, you'll recall, well, you may have seen, may have been too busy to see my email on Friday asking that question. And secondly, we ask you to inspect and test any wells in the vicinity of the council bores to prevent cross-contamination occurring from those old rusted bore casings and make sure they get shut down permanently. Now, Napier's mayor, you may not be aware, she says she's going to go broken record on chlorine-free. Well, good on Kirsten Wise. She's on the right track, and she firmly believes that we should have the right to drink the pure water from our unique aquifer without adding chlorine. But we need regional councillors who have the courage to fight for recognition of the Heritonga aquifer. This unique aquifer, which has given us pristine artesian water for generations, It should never need to be chlorinated. You've done it before, Rex, you will remember in 2016, you informed Judith Collins, then Minister of Energy, that HBRC was scoping a plan change to protect the Hiratonga aquifer from oil and gas exploration. Do you remember that?
We did it.
You did it. Well done. You can do it again. We need you to fight so that this government recognises that our unique artesian water from the Hiratonga aquifer.
Thank you, Pauline.
And part of the handout I've given you, which you can keep, is the other plans that Nanaia Mahuta has in store for us. Not just control of our water, but also taking over the role of councils when it comes to resource management. I'm not sure what Hawke's Bay Regional Council will be left doing, but we may well see a rates decrease. Thank you. Any questions?
Pauline, no, we don't have time for any questions. I'm afraid you used your entire 10 minutes, a little bit more in fact.
I'm hoping I've answered all your questions. Can I please have those thick copies back?
Yep. And yes, was that, did I have one? Yes.
You're allowed to keep that one. You can have it.
Thank you.
So councillors, we're going to break now for lunch, which is upstairs. And we'll try and get back here as close to 5 past 2.
I know what you mean.
5 past 2. We have someone coming in at 2.
Sorry, what's that? Only 20 minutes to lunch.